BXB. It's in the game!
Hey guys, it's me Ben, back with another one of my off-the-cuff patented reviews, just from a few notes and no script. I'm just going to chat a little bit about Mass Effect Andromeda, and I think I should say from the off, especially if you listen to the podcast, the last episode, I am a massive fan of the Mass Effect franchise, and therefore I came to this game with a great deal of anticipation and excitement and a desire for it to be absolutely amazing. So I think it's fair to say this is possibly one of the hardest reviews of a game I've ever done, with around 65-70 hours of gameplay now into single player and multiplayer. I've beaten the story and I've put a lot of time into the multiplayer as well. I've never felt so conflicted by a game. Every bit of me wants to love this game. I love the series, I love the universe, I love the idea. However, there are a lot of problems with Mass Effect Andromeda, and that really hurts for me to say and for me to admit, because you can tell BioWare, these guys were trying to make a fantastic game, and a lot of the game is really, really good, and a lot of the game is fun and enjoyable, but it is also filled with some big problems. So the basic premise of Andromeda is between the stories of Mass Effect 2 and 3, in that rough point in the timeline, we decide to send a bunch of different races in the Milky Way galaxy send people out to the Andromeda galaxy to set up a new colony. This idea of pushing the frontier, pushing the boundaries, and getting out there and really seeing what's available in an entirely different galaxy. A journey that takes over 600 years in cryosleep, and that's how the game starts, basically, with a little bit of intro video which you just saw, and then you were introduced to your character here. This is my custom rider, and I actually spent a lot of time making my custom face for it, then to realise later on that it looks quite a lot like the default face, so I might have wasted quite a bit of time there. But there we go. That speaks immediately to one of the biggest gripes in this game, which are the facial animation issues. Now, it's been interesting reviewing this game after release, because first of all, I wasn't intending to review this game, somebody else was going to do it, so I had to pick up the slack on that one at a bit of a last minute situation. But reviewing it after seeing all the criticism makes it quite a difficult experience, and because your colours your view of the game a little bit. But I've sort of tried to divorce myself from that as I look at it critically and look at it in its own merits. And I do think people have been judging Andromeda a little bit harshly against what they expected and hoped the game to be, and then also against the legacy of the previous three games. Not judging it necessarily on its own basis. But of course you could also argue that that's fair. So this is my rider. This is the introduction to the game here. I personally don't have a massive problem with the facial animations. I think actually what has really shown itself to me over the dozens and dozens and dozens of hours I play with the game is the biggest problem I have is what they've done with the dialogue system when it comes to the actual sort of story stuff. Is that by removing Paragon and Renegade, removing that kind of binary morality, it's made all your responses a little bit on the bland side, a little bit on the samey side. Even if you come across as a complete dick, you end up getting kind of the same results from most of the situations and most of the quests. There seems to be very little kind of result or ramification to the decisions you make throughout this game. There are some big choices in the game which become pretty obvious when story beats and stuff like that. However, it doesn't feel like it's as weighty. Now, I would argue as well that BioWare made a very conscious decision to make this feel like a lighter story, a lighter and more sort of friendly experience, an experience based around exploration, the pioneering spirit, and I think they've really captured that. There is an optimism to Andromeda that I really enjoy. This feeling of getting out into the universe, starting fresh, not willing to repeat the same mistakes that have been repeated in the Milky Way. And I really dig that feel. Obviously, the universe presented to you is a vast one with 100 planets, which is a little bit disingenuous because a lot of the planets you can just fly to and scan and probe and do that sort of thing. It's not really a case of being able to land on 100 planets. You get to land on about half a dozen planets with some smaller hubs and locations as well that you can explore and do combat in, but they're usually specifically designed around, for example, a loyalty mission. However, there's nothing wrong with that. Another criticism that's been regularly levied at the game is these unskippable sort of travel animations, either in system or between the systems. And as you get further and further into the game, and you have racked up, you know, the 60, the 70, the 80, 100 hours, yeah, to a degree I can kind of see where people are coming from. You might want to get around a little bit faster. However, I think the actual animations are great because they give you a real sense of place. They're very well done. They make you sort of really appreciate the galaxy and the look of the universe that's been created, and really convince you of how different it is to the Milky Way. Then again, it's space, isn't it? It's nebula, it's asteroid fields, it's dust and sort of star stuff and things like that. And you know, I think it looks pretty. It can get a little bit annoying, I suppose, because, you know, if you just want to get from mission to mission, critical area to critical area, that can be a little bit of a delay in the process. The next thing I really want to talk about, however, is probably the biggest improvement we've seen in the Mass Effect series in some time, and that's sort of just the combat and the traversal elements, and basically the dodge and the jump pack have really freshened up the experience of combat within Mass Effect Andromeda. You get to feel more mobile and effective than you ever have before. I think it really lends itself to sort of an aggressive play style, especially using things like biotic charge and more sort of impactful maneuvers. You do have this new system basically, which is, I think, fantastic. Is the new skill system, which means you can put points into anything at any time, and you are not forced to pick a class from the offset like you were in the previous game. So no longer do you have to be an engineer or an adept or a vanguard or a soldier, etc. You can change them on the fly, and these are called profiles. So what I found myself doing was playing quite versatile. I would use my tech abilities with sort of a tech profile in certain encounters, then I would switch using the weapon wheel to sort of vanguard to get aggressive in other encounters and things, and everything in between. You know, there's even like a general profile, I think it's the Explorer, which uses all three, but that even gives you some pretty decent benefits of playing, and it really lets you play the game how you want to play it in the combat side, which is, I think, really, really cool. The game has never looked better, in my opinion. You know, people can talk about the facial animations, the character models, but the environments look fantastic because we're using the Frostbite engine here now. Things look absolutely stunning, and it's honestly, the environment's just mind-blowing. There's a great variety to the different planets you actually get to land on and explore, and it really gives you a sense of, you know, pushing out into this new worlds and to this new galaxy. However, what kind of counteracts that is the fact that in this new galaxy you only get 2 different alien races. Because of the nature of the game, these pioneers from the different races in the Milky Way galaxy heading out to Andromeda, you have taken with you the Solarians, the Asari, the Turians, and the Krogan, and that means, you know, you're getting to see a lot of that again, the same enemies, the same characters, you know, which is a real shame. What have been created here, the Ket and the Angarans, are, you know, they're unique enough, but then again, they're just bipedal aliens, and they don't look that different, I suppose, and that's a fair criticism. However, the biggest problem is in combat, while there is a lot of variety to how you can move around and stuff, and there are 3 basic enemy groups you fight against, they all have very similar subtypes within them, which means the actual combat experiences aren't always that different. However, I mean, that's the biggest problem, is that when you're fighting in these combat experiences in the open world, with the cover system and stuff like that, there is a lot of sort of repetition to those engagements. When you fight, however, in my favourite part of the game, which are the loyalty missions, which are these bespoke missions, usually in bespoke environments, focus on your 6 main crew members, you have a great time because they're really well designed, and also the dialogue focusing on those characters are the best they are at any point in the game. It's absolutely fantastic. That's the best storytelling, that's the best combat, and that's the best level design is in the loyalty missions. It's absolutely well done. Really, really, really well done. Now let's talk about your crew. Some people have had issues, you know, they're saying that there's a little bit of, they're a bit banal, they're a bit middle of the road, they're a bit samey. I don't think so. I actually really like my crew. I think the 6 main squad mates you get have enough variety. They're funny, they're engaging. Some of them are definitely standouts for me, like Vetra and PB I really, really like, but I've heard lots of people saying they don't like certain characters that I like, so that means they're doing something right. That means they've created some genuinely standout characters that, you know, will get people feeling one way or the other about them. I like that. Now, let's talk a little bit about the writing. The writing has been another point of criticism that's come up quite a lot. It's a problem because because in Mass Effect Andromeda, they're not doing this big galactic threat, which means there isn't this thing pushing you along at 100 miles an hour, feeling like if you don't deal with it, this threat, this barreling down, the Reapers are coming, the Reapers are coming, the Reapers are here, we've got to fight this war. That means the narrative feels very different. It's a slower, sort of more carefree kind of approach to Mass Effect. I like it. There's, like I said earlier, there's a feeling of optimism, there's a feeling of exploration, and I think that all comes across, especially as how I played my Ryder. He was like slightly open-eyed, optimistic, always willing to try and do the right thing, always willing to have a joke, have a laugh with the guys. Everything was a bit silly, because how else do you deal with these kind of crazy situations? You could argue that means it's not the strongest writing in the world. However, I didn't have the biggest problems with it. I actually quite enjoyed how things came across. And there is a main story thrust, obviously. There are the priority missions, which push you through the story, with mostly focusing on the Ket and the Remnant, which is the sort of like leftover alien stuff that you find, which I often explore in these caves and stuff. That's really, really cool. And then there's the threat of the Ket, which I think unveils itself quite nicely as the story progresses, and obviously leaves it open nicely for a sequel. So I haven't got really much issue with that. I actually quite enjoyed the story and the characters in this game. But there are technical problems in this game. There are so many technical problems in this game. I think I heard it described as death by 1,000 cuts. Like, there aren't any particularly standout, glaring problems. I had one infinite load, which resulted me in having to restart the game. However, there is texture popping continuously. There is the aforementioned facial animation problems. There are loading time issues. There are animation issues which involve default T-poses. There are parts where the game doesn't load in properly. So when you're running around the Nexus, there's just so many little issues. Oh yeah, there's frame rate hitching. It's not like a slowing down of issue of frame rates when you're traveling around planets or just walking around, but the whole game will lock up for multiple seconds, sometimes only one, sometimes fine. Has the game crashed? You don't know. It normally comes back, but I'm guessing what it is it's trying to stream in the background. It's trying to load in the environment you're going to, and sadly the game can't keep up with the pace of your traversal, which is frustrating. It just breaks the experience, and it pulls you out. And I want to be immersed in Mass Effect Andromeda. I want to be swept up into the story and not be pulled out of it every few minutes with a little technical hiccup. And that's a real shame. That's the crying shame of this game, is that you can see the brilliance on display. You can see the ambition constantly. This is by far the biggest Mass Effect game ever made. It's vast in its levels. It's vast in its world and its galaxy. It's almost too big. There's almost too much to do. The fact that you have this laundry list of quests at times, poorly laid out. Why can't I look at quests based on the planet I'm on? Yeah, that's just crazy. You have to look through these various priorities, ally quests, secondary quests, and additional tasks. It's just poorly thought out. But that's kind of a minor gripe. The biggest problem, I think, is the technical problem. I mean, what you're seeing some footage of here is one of the, I think, unsung brilliant pillars of Mass Effect, which is its fantastic cooperative multiplayer experience, which I think many people forget. There are only a few levels, like 5 levels, but they're really well designed combat areas, and you get to have all these different classes and unlocks and play with your friends, and it's fantastic. Like, this horde mode is so well done, so much fun. I've spent tens of hours playing this with friends, as well as playing the single player, and I highly recommend checking it out as well. But you can't deny, though, that the main reason anybody's coming to Mass Effect is for that single player experience. And while I think the story is good, not amazing, but good, and I like the characters, though I maybe don't love the characters like I did maybe from Mass Effect 2, I do think the game has a lot of problems. And I think there's an amazing level of ambition to this game, and I love that, and I love the scope and the sense of exploration, but it's really marred by those technical issues that I keep harping on about. And like I said at the beginning of this review, I want to love this game. I'm probably going to get in a lot of trouble with my wife for not loving this game a little bit more, because like me, she's a massive fan and really genuinely want me and everybody to love this game. She's quite worried about the sales and will we get a sequel because of the negative reaction. And I just think BioWare needed a little bit more time. They needed 6 months to polish up those technical issues. That might not have fixed the narrative problems and the facial animation, but if we could have just had a more stable, cleaner running game, it would have got a lot less criticism. And I think, you know, that leaves me in only one place, that it's not a terrible game. It's not this hot mess, this flaming trash pile that some people have made it out to be. But it is, however, not as good as it could have been. And that means I can only give Mass Effect Andromeda, and it saddens me to say this, but I can only give it 3 out of 5 stars.
Come on! We have to find Varand! We don't even know if this is the way. Well, something has to go right! You take a risk for the right reason. It's supposed to work! Ugh.
You dent your locker, the principal will be pissed.
It isn't a joke! I jumped us here blind. We don't know where anyone is or how anything works. And now we're fighting some asshole who wants everyone chained. It's like hitting Andromeda all over again.
Shield the man.
Don't make this about the whole initiative. We're here to help, and why am I the one defending your plan?
I don't know.
I will not be ignored anymore.
See? Total asshole.
BXB. It's in the game.